Tony Blair said on the day of the explosions that "we know this was done in the name of Islam," when there was no proof whatsoever of who had done it, therefore indicating he possibly had foreknowledge of the plan and who they intended to blame and the reason why they were going to blame the Muslims. As proof that this was a slip-up and needed covering up, look at how the BBC later falsely reported his actual words, giving further proof that the BBC is a government propaganda machine and the coverage was organised exactly as Michael Portillo said it would be in the BBC Panorama programme in May 2004. Later that same day, Ephraim Halevi, a former head of the Israeli Mossad, wrote in an article published on the Jerusalem Post website at 18:10 p.m. London time that the attacks had been carried out simultaneously with near-perfect execution. How did he know they had only been near-perfect? How could he have known what the perfect results should have been in order to know that the actual results were not perfect, unless he was in on the plot? How many more people had they intended to murder in order for it to be considered perfect execution? How did he know, at least 2 days before the London authorities released the information on the 9th of July, that the bombs were detonated simultaneously, unless he was in on the plot? As proof that this too was a slip-up, the Jerusalem Post article in question was completely removed from their website after people began to ask similar questions. The following day, Police Commissioner Ian Blair also made a slip-up on camera and said that there were 4 miserable bombers, and then very quickly corrected himself, showing that he too possibly had foreknowledge of the plan to use 4 Muslims as patsies.
If London could survive the Blitz, it can survive 4 miserable bombers like this. I'm not saying there are 4 bombers, 4 miserable events like this.
We are told that the first reports were of an electrical power surge that occurred, and then later we were told that there were bombs that exploded on the tube trains and that it was an Al-Qaeda terrorist attack, with Muslim suicide bombers carrying backpack homemade explosive devices onto the tube trains. A couple of weeks later, a Brazilian contract electrician is brutally and publicly murdered on a tube train, and again we are told lies by the police and media about him. He was a contract electrician. For whom had he been working, and what had he been working on in the days leading up to the 7th of July 2005? Remember that the first reports from the media about 7/7/2005 were of an electrical power surge, and John Charles de Menezes was a contract electrician. Was he hired as part of the terrorist exercises 1,000 people to wire up devices for mock explosions to be set off by a power surge? Did he see the explosive devices being fastened under the tube train carriage floors and later realize what had really happened and was starting to talk about it? Did they, the hierarchy enslaving you, publicly execute him to shut him up and as a warning to others to keep their mouths shut? We have been unable to find out where he worked. We know about his cousins who live in London and his family coming over from Brazil, but we do not know where he worked. Why? Who is the person calling himself Richard Jones and claiming to have been next to the suicide bomber on the bus and a witness to the bus bombing? And why did he tell so many lies? Why did Peter Power smirk, grin and giggle when he spoke about the coincidence that the exercise had turned out to be real, when lots of people had been killed and injured. What is funny about that? The probability of the 7/7/2005 drill and attack coinciding without being planned to coincide in a 10-year period is 1 chance in 3715599261575000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000000. I wonder why the media aren't investigating the drill. Why are Peter Power, Verint Systems, Richard Jones, Commissioner Ian Blair, the anti-terrorist branch who shot and murdered these innocent people, the Israeli Mossad, Tony Blair, and the government itself not under investigation for these horrendous crimes? 8th chapter title. Conclusion. The times of the trains and tube trains on that day have been carefully checked. The first train after 07:40 a.m. left Luton at 07:56 a.m. and arrived at King's Cross Thameslink station at 08:42 a.m. The 3 tube trains that blew up left King's Cross Underground station at 08:35 a.m. the eastbound Circle Line train number 204. 08:42 a.m. the westbound Circle Line train number 216. 08:48 a.m. the Piccadilly Line train south. It was therefore impossible for any of the 4 accused Muslims to have caught the tube trains that blew up. If we have at least 3 of the 4 suicide bombers being shot dead at Canary Wharf, and we know they weren't on the tube trains because the 07:40 a.m. train from Luton to King's Cross was cancelled that day, and the photo of them outside Luton station at 07:21:54 a.m. is a fake, and that Hasib Hussein was part of the mock terrorism exercise, then we have overwhelming proof that the 4 accused Muslims were patsies and are innocent, and that it was an inside job, and that, like Lee Harvey Oswald, they too have been murdered to silence them.